I will not be ignored, Dan. Not the bunny, anything but the bunny. Hello everyone, I'm Sarah from Everyday Starlet. Welcome to my channel. I make videos to inspire you to be the star of your own life. I'm continuing my masculine feminine energies film breakdown series with Fatal Attraction. If you're not familiar with what I mean by masculine and feminine energies, I talk about this in most of my videos, but a brief summary. Masculine and feminine energies are energies that live within all of us. We all contain both energies. We all have a core energy. That's the one we're most ourselves in. That core energy often links up with our gender. It doesn't have to, but it very often does. And we can be in wounded or healed versions of either of these energies. And these energies contain archetypes. We all contain all of the archetypes that we can tap into whenever we need to, and I have tons of videos about the masculine and the feminine archetypes. And in order to have sexual polarity in a relationship, you need one partner to be in the masculine and one partner to be in the feminine, because opposite energies attract sexually and same energies repel sexually. So let's get to Fatal Attraction. This film was a request, and honestly, I had never watched this movie. It's such a culturally iconic film. There's been so many references to it, so I kind of knew the story, but I'd never actually sat down and watched the movie. I really just watched it because I figured, okay, it's such an iconic film that I really needed to sit down and watch it. I'm gonna be honest, it's not the best movie for doing these breakdowns because there's not a lot of like individual scenes to actually break down the energies. But I did want to talk about a few overarching themes in this movie that I do think are relevant to the masculine and the feminine. So essentially, Michael Douglas is a married lawyer and he ends up having an affair with Glenn Close, and then drama ensues. Now, I find it really interesting that in all the years that I've heard about this movie, that this movie has been so iconic, the main overarching thing that you hear about this movie is basically that Glenn Close's character, Alex, has slept with a married man and now she's gone crazy and she's obsessed with him. And we always talk about how crazy she is and how crazy she went. And we don't really focus on Michael Douglas's character, Dan, and his role in this dynamic that happens. And I want to start off by saying that I am not justifying anything that Alex did in this movie. Some of the things she did were flat out criminal, and I'm not justifying that. I'm not encouraging women to go out and perform criminal activities. That said, I didn't really feel bad for Dan at all. I honestly, the whole movie, I was just like, yeah, he kind of deserved this. I mean, I don't think that Dan's family deserved this, but I definitely think that her trying to ruin his life was kind of like, well, hey. It's kind of like when he went to talk to the police and they were like, well, he made his bed, he has to lie in it. So I want to take this film opportunity to talk about the subject of infidelity. And I've touched on this in a few other video breakdowns, but I want to dig into it a little bit more because that's essentially at the root of this film. Yes, Alex knew that Dan was married, so she is to some extent accountable for her actions. However, she is a single woman and she didn't pressure Dan. You could very easily argue that she flirted with him. She was very seductive with him. I wouldn't say she seduced him because he didn't really take that much seducing. However, you know, she was flirtatious with him, and I definitely would encourage women when it comes to embracing your feminine energy. A big part of that is owning and knowing your worth, and part of that is not getting involved with men who are unavailable. Because at the end of the day, a man who is unavailable, meaning that he's married or simply unavailable in some other sense, is not a man that is going to actually treat you in a way that you deserve to be treated. And I fully believe that as a feminine woman, you deserve a man who is going to be devoted to you and is going to show up in your life as a masculine partner and not someone who is basically just having you as a side chick. So that's an important note. Now, Dan's marriage did not appear to be that bad. We don't really get a lot of clues into all of Dan's marriage, but it didn't seem that bad. Now, it was kind of clear that Dan and his wife were struggling a little bit in the intimacy department. They had a 5-year-old daughter and, you know, a life together that was a bit chaotic, and that you get the impression that their intimacy had slacked off a bit. However, it wasn't like his wife was letting herself go. It wasn't like she wasn't still fun and playful with him. In reality, their lack of intimacy seemed like on the surface was something that could have easily been remedied. You know, they, at one point in the movie, they have a babysitter come over to watch their daughter so that the two of them can go off to a work event that he had. If they could do that for a work event, they could have easily done that for a night and gone out and had a night out in town together and, you know, maybe got in a hotel room or something like that. Once they moved to the country and they were closer to, you know, Dan's in-laws, they were very involved in the daughter's life, so it would have given them space, so they could have had a little bit more alone time to actually be a couple. And I do think that that is really important. It's not something that really gets talked about enough in our society, is that it's great for both people, the husband and the wife, especially once you have children. Obviously, priorities change, schedules change, but it is also super important for you as a couple to also connect to each other as husband and wife and not just as parents. Not just for you, but it is important for both of you, both the man and the woman. I think a lot of people get into this whole, oh, it's just for the husband, it's just for the husband. No, it's good for the husband and the wife. And I do also firmly believe that it is the responsibility of parents to show a representation of what a healthy, intimate relationship is to their children, which is in part going to be cultivated by the love and polarity that they share as a couple. And honestly, I think that responsibility should fall on both parents. I do think when you have a lot of husbands, because I hear this most often, but I'm sure that it happens in reverse, but I do hear a lot of husbands that complain that the wife is mostly just interested in the children anymore and is not as interested in him or in cultivating intimacy. And honestly, if you are in a relationship, in a marriage, where you are the one who is feeling like the other partner is not showing as much affection, not showing up, is not being as intimate, we can only control ourselves. So I think it's on us to bring that to the table and to either discuss it or to try to switch things up or to actually go forth and make the effort. If your partner isn't going to meet you part way, then I think that that's where you may want to look into maybe counseling or, you know, working with a coach or something like that. There's always ways around that. And I am a very, very, very firm advocate against infidelity. I think the person who cheats, it's always on them. Cheating is a decision that a person makes. They always have the option to not be unfaithful. I don't think there's any excuses for it. I know people have reasons for it, but I don't ever think there's any excuses for it. If you're not happy in your relationship, then do something about that. You either work on the relationship or you leave the relationship. You don't seek something outside the relationship that should be found within the relationship. That's my stance. So as far as I'm concerned, Dan stepping outside of his marriage was wrong. Point blank, period, wrong. I know there's gonna be men who have the excuse, well, she wasn't as interested, well, she wasn't this. You know, there were ways around that. At least the way it was presented in this movie, their relationship was not that bad. It was not that lacking, and it probably wouldn't have taken too much in order for them to get their intimacy back on track. It was really just obviously a matter of scheduling and stuff, because they obviously did still have an attraction for each other. So basically, Dan's wife and daughter go off to the country, and Dan is left at the apartment, and he ends up hooking up with Alex. And it's not just a one-night stand. I mean, I think he thinks it's a one-night stand, but those two have a pretty intimate weekend together. Like, it's an intense weekend, starting out with like a really passionate one-night stand, and then they hook up quite a bit throughout the weekend. And, you know, they share meals together, they go for walks in the parks together. Like, they have this sort of pseudo relationship that's going on. Obviously, in Dan's mind, this is just a fun weekend he's having with this woman. In Alex's mind, she sees this as a developing relationship. And I know a lot of people talk about her being delusional and her being unstable, and she obviously does have some instability. However, this is not an uncommon situation. Is it uncommon for women to get quite as dramatic as Glenn Close's character gets? Yes. But these feelings that she has, not that uncommon. Sex is just different for men and women. It is. It has to be. Okay? Women have the risk of pregnancy. Men don't have that same risk. Women are the ones who have to open and are entered. Men are the ones who do the penetrating. Our sexual organs, one is on the inside of our body, the other one is on the outside of our body. Energetically, it's different. Vulnerability wise, it's just different. And women are always more vulnerable in sexual situations than men are. It's just how it works. Most women, because of our hormones do release a chemical that causes us to attach to a man once we've had sexual intimacy with him. It's the same chemical that is released when a woman gives birth, and it's not necessarily just during that the act of sex, but it's basically like a love hormone that gets released in a woman's body. And, you know, it's part of her body, it's part of her makeup. So I don't want people to get too obsessed with this concept of this one individual hormone. However, it does cause women to bond. Energetically, women's hearts and their genitalia are very much connected. So it's actually very difficult for most women to disconnect their heart from their sexual organs. Because for one thing, women really kind of have to open their heart to a certain extent in order to use their sexual organs. I'm sure there are exceptions to this. I know there's a lot of women that like to come to my content and be like, I'm not like that, I'm not like that. And maybe you aren't. And I'm sure there are exceptions. That said, most of the women that I have known personally, that I've like gotten to know in real life, who have said that that doesn't happen to them, were usually women who, and this is gonna be controversial, but I'm gonna say it, usually women who were on some type of medication or had some kind of addiction problems, something in their life that, to me, was an indication that they were very disconnected from their bodies. So when women are very disconnected from their bodies, they can kind of dismiss the idea that they're bonding with people because they're not connected to what's actually going on in their bodies. So it's kind of like they become removed from the sexual act, removed from the feelings, removed from the emotions. And I'm not saying that that's always the case. I'm sure there are exceptions, so I don't want to get all upset with me. However, very often, in my own experience, for women that I have known in real life, like not just people talking to me on social media, but women who I've known in real life, who I've had these discussions with, who I've gotten to know, who have said that they don't have feelings for people when it comes to sex and that they don't get emotionally attached and whatever, usually have something else in their life that is an indication that they are actually disconnected or disassociated with what's going on with their bodies and their hearts and all that kind of stuff. So whereas with men, and I do know when I've talked about this, I've had, you know, men talk to me about how they, you know, they get attached and stuff like that. I'm not saying that that can't happen. However, in general, it is much easier for men to disconnect from their heart and their sexual activity. In fact, for some men, it's actually quite difficult to connect their heart to their sexual activity, depending on, you know, his own personal experiences. And I also find it very interesting. I see it a lot on social media now where men are saying that, well, the thing that women don't understand is that men can sleep with another woman and still love their wife and their family, and it's just sex to them. And, you know, honestly, I think most women do understand that about men. We don't like it, but we understand it. However, I would make the argument, because most men that say this understand that for women, it's not like that. For women, our sexual activity and our hearts are connected. Love and sex go together. That as a man, if you really do love your wife and you do sleep with another woman, you know that that's going to hurt your wife. So you are not acting in a way that is loving to your wife by sleeping with somebody else. I would also argue, because I know most people don't like to think about the other woman and her situations and her feelings, because a lot of people even blame her for the whole situation. However, if you as a man know that women have a very difficult time, if not in some cases an impossible time, disconnecting their feelings and their heart from their sexual activity, and you are a married man who goes off and sleeps with another woman, you are now bringing that woman's feelings and emotions into your energy field. And now you're bringing that into your life. And that's just energetically. If you are a man who wants to be a protector for your family, because as the masculine partner in a relationship, it's your role to protect your family, and you actually expose your body to another woman, then you are not protecting your family, because for one, you're running the risk that you may pick up something from another woman and bring it back to your wife, which is not protecting your family at all. It's actively putting your family's health at risk. Or you potentially run the risk, which happened in this movie, of impregnating the other woman, because no protection is 100%. So you run the risk of impregnating another woman, which means that your resources are now going to have to go to a woman and a child in another situation, and those resources are not going to your family, which means you're not stepping up as a provider in your family. So by being unfaithful to your wife, even if you are capable of doing it because your heart is not connected and you feel like you can still love your wife and family, you are not acting in a loving way to your wife and family. You are certainly not acting in a loving way to the woman that you are using for sex. And you are not being a protector and provider for your family, which means that you are not acting in the masculine role in your family structure. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. I have a lot of other videos where I discuss the concept of men running around with a lot of different women and how that's actually very wounded feminine energy. And in this movie, we don't actually know if Dan has done this before, if he's done this with other women. It's really not, it's not said, it's not implied. I will say that Alex does have a lot of sexual energy. She has a lot of feminine energy within her, particularly when they meet. She is very magnetic. She's got this way about her that is very sensual. She's kind of got that kind of cool feminine kind of air about her. And then once they get together and they end up going off to a nightclub and dancing, and things get really hot and steamy and things get really spicy with the two of them, and that's kind of when her fiery feminine starts coming out, and the two of them kind of have this very sexually polarized relationship. Dan is sort of very much in the structure, in the seriousness, and she is very much in this feminine flow of like, let's go here and let's go there. And she is very much in her feminine energy, so you can see how the two of them got polarized. However, pretty soon when Dan decides to leave, she gets very clingy and she's very needy. Very common in women after they've had a sexual experience, particularly as an intense a sexual experience as the two of them have had, and especially this kind of like weekend of bonding where they've kind of coupled together in this weekend and they've had this dynamic together. She really feels this loss. Now, the feminine does not like loss. She doesn't like emptiness. She wants to be filled. She wants to be full. Whereas the masculine is much more comfortable in emptiness. So he's much more comfortable letting go and releasing. And that's kind of where it shifts to. You know, when Dan decides he has to leave, Alex is like, no, I want to feel your fullness. And that's kind of where it starts. And Dan is kind of very comfortable letting go. Like, okay, this can't go anywhere. This is over. We had our fun. This is that. Like, he's done. He's very disconnected and disassociated. And she is now feeling even more emotions that are coming through her and this connection, and that's where Alex really shifts into her wounded feminine. And I would say that, I mean, this is an extreme case for sure, but Alex is very much overall in her wounded feminine. She slips into wounded masculine here and there. She's a very wounded character, obviously, overall. I do believe that she is naturally feminine at her core because she does have that flow within her, and because, again, she is craving that fullness. She's craving that love. She's not going about it the right way. However, she is craving that. So she's obviously a very feminine character naturally, but she really shifts into this extremely wounded feminine character. Her suicide attempts, constantly calling him, chasing him. The fact that she even got involved with a married man to begin with, it all feels very self-abusive. And it does shift into trying to abuse him and trying to abuse people outside of her. So that's when it kind of shifts into her wounded masculine. When you're outwardly abusing, that's usually when you're in your wounded masculine. When you're inwardly abusing and you're hurting yourself, that's more wounded feminine. And that's in everybody. We all have both. But she, overarching, I would say, is very much in wounded feminine, and then it ends up shifting into wounded masculine when she really gets desperate. But that neediness, that clinginess, that trying to feel that fullness in him, it's like an addiction. I know some people are going to say that that's chasing, which chasing very often can be wounded masculine, that trying to control him. I mean, she's got signs of both for sure, but it's that wounded feminine that is the addictive personality that needs to constantly get filled, and that's really what she's expressing. It doesn't really necessarily appear as much as she's trying to control him. She's trying to get him, but it feels less controlling and it feels more needy and just needing to be filled by him. Not so much trying to control what he does, although there is a level of manipulation that she gets into when she gets desperate. So I do think that this is a little bit more wounded feminine than I would say wounded masculine, but there is some wounded masculine in there, especially when she starts to actually get violent. And look, if I was advising a woman who got into a situation like this, I would advise a woman not to get into a situation like this. But if I was advising a woman to get into a situation like this and the man has made it very clear that he's not leaving his wife and that this is done, I would advise a woman to walk away with her dignity and move on to somebody who was worth her time and energy, for sure. That said, in movie form, there was definitely a part of me that was watching this going, oh yeah, I hope he gets his. I really do. Like, there was really nothing about him in this role that made me feel for him. Like, I was like, no, like, he literally brought this whole thing on himself. Like, and I felt horrible for the wife, absolutely. I really wanted him to go down. I did, because he really started this whole thing. And I mean, as much as I've never been, you know, psychotic like this, and I've never done the things that Glenn Close did, I've never been somebody who's constantly calling a guy or something like that. However, I do know what it feels like to be used and then have somebody just feel like, whatever, it was what it was, no big deal. And so my heart goes out to her, and I feel like just about every woman who's ever been in a situation where they have gotten involved with a guy where they thought that the guy cared about them more than they actually did, and then when the guy kind of got what he wanted, she was left with nothing. I gotta say, I think every woman that's ever been in that situation fantasizes about doing the things that Glenn Close did in this movie to this guy. I do think that to some extent, while I would never imply anybody should model themselves after that, I do think that this movie can be therapeutic in that sense, because you can kind of live it vicariously through another character. And that's kind of the way to express your dark feminine, like anger, rage, frustration, like those shadow parts of yourself, and make it into art. Like, write it out like a screenplay. Like, if you are in that situation as a woman where, I mean, whether he was a married man or whether he wasn't, but you were a woman who feels scorned, like you were a woman scorned, write it as a screenplay. Or just like a little play or something like that. You don't even have to show it to anybody. It can literally just be like a journal entry, but like write it as a screenplay of like, of all the horrible things that you'd like to do to this person. Like, write it as a poem, or create a, you know, a painting or an artwork or something like that. Like, get that stuff out creatively. I wouldn't suggest actually doing these things, like actually breaking the law. Like, if you think about it, like when she basically like destroyed his car, like all that kept playing through my head was like Carrie Underwood's "I dug my key right to the side." Like, honestly, I gotta admit, if guys thought that there were this kind of consequences to being unfaithful, I think less men would be unfaithful. I did actually know a guy I was working with when that Carrie Underwood song came out, and I remember him like freaking out about the song. Like, he freaked out about that song. It terrified him. I thought about it and I was like, this guy was kind of a player. And I was like, the only guy that's gonna be freaked out by a song like that is the type of guy that's going to put a woman in a situation where she would get so angry with him that she would feel like she needed to like destroy his car. Like, if men thought that if they cheated that a woman had a right to destroy his car, I wonder if fewer men would cheat. I also got to thinking in this movie that this was the 80s, and I don't remember time period wise when like this was in pop culture, but for those of you that are my age, you'll know what I'm talking about. For those of you that are younger, maybe Google it. Lorena Bobbitt. Just saying. I mean, I think collectively as women, if we all band together and said we're not tolerating this, and that's another aspect of infidelity actually that I want to impart on you, because I do think this is something that's been relevant in my life, is I don't have a huge history of infidelity as far as relationships. I've never cheated, and I mean, this has never happened, but in general, I don't have a pattern with partners being unfaithful, and I really do believe that a big part of that is because I just don't tolerate it. I have a zero tolerance policy for infidelity. I will leave. And I've proven that to myself, because in past relationships, when boundaries were crossed in certain situations, not necessarily where a partner was even unfaithful, but where a boundary around fidelity was crossed, I walked away. And I was willing to walk away because I knew, I was so grounded in that decision and that belief. I knew my truth, and I knew that that is what I would not tolerate. So it really has not come up a lot in my life. And I believe that some of that is because energetically, I'm just putting it out there. And I make that very clear early on in relationships that I just don't tolerate infidelity. I just don't. And so if it's gonna happen, I'm leaving. It's done. So if a man does do it, he's going into it knowing that, like, yeah, I'm not gonna just be like, well, I don't know, maybe. I'm done, and that's it. So if he thinks that losing our relationship is worth what he wants to do, then he makes the decision to do that. However, I'm grounded in that decision within myself. And I would actually encourage women, if you actually find yourself repeatedly in those patterns or in fear about those patterns, is actually really getting grounded in what you want and actually being really grounded in the concept of what will I tolerate in a relationship and what won't I. And if you just decide that you won't tolerate something in a relationship, you're not going to call it in as much. It's not that it's never going to happen. It could happen to anybody. However, if you just know that you are not going to tolerate it and you have confidence within yourself that you will walk away if that is what is happening, then you're going to call less of it into your life. And I think that's an important note. Honestly, that goes for men or women. I really do believe that that's a universal thing. That, you know, if you just are saying, hey, I don't show up for this, I will not tolerate this, you're going to call in less of it. And also, you're also going to be really confident within yourself that you're going to have the ability to walk away if that is what's happening. Now I'm going to get into some really controversial stuff. So Alex ends up telling Dan that she is pregnant. And it's his baby. She hasn't slept with anybody else. And I find it interesting that Dan actually says to her, we didn't use anything, which is kind of like, yeah, okay, Dan, like a little late to be asking that. Shouldn't you have asked that question beforehand? Especially because this movie was from the 80s. The 80s was the time of the AIDS epidemic. Like, I mean, I don't know how a person could be that careless in that time period with all that stuff that was going on like that. Pregnancy is not the only thing in a sexual situation that could have been a problem, especially in that time period. Just saying. Whenever he said that, I was just like, yeah, a little late for that, Dan, right? It's interesting how Dan's like, you're not gonna have to go through this alone. And he basically realizes that by not go through this alone, he means I'm gonna go through with and pay for you to have an abortion. And she says she's not gonna have an abortion because she wants to keep this baby. She's at an age, I think she's 36, maybe her last chance, and she's gonna have a baby with or without him. Clearly, she wants it to be with him. I don't even know if I'm going to keep this in the video, but I'm just going to say this because I know that the whole Roe versus Wade thing and the abortion issue is a big topic, and I don't want to get into a big political discussion about this. However, I feel like we talk a lot in our society about whether or not men should have a say in situations like this because women are afraid that if men have a say, that they're going to force women to get pregnant and have their babies. And I understand that that may happen sometimes. I'm not saying that that's not a possibility. That said, what I see happening much more often, what I have witnessed in, not in my own personal life, but in lives of some people I know and the lives of women I have talked to, is actually that a woman will get pregnant and the man will actually pressure and sometimes come pretty darn close to forcing her to have the abortion when she didn't really want one. And very often that man will promise her things like that he'll be there for her or things like that, and then he isn't, because at that point it's not his problem anymore in his mind. And I don't want to get into a political discussion about this. I'm not going to. If people do start getting into a political discussion, I'm just going to delete the comments because I don't want to get into politics about this. However, I do think that yes, there's a baby. And that whether or not it's a human life or whether it is, I know that that's a big debate that a lot of people have. And I'm not going to get into that discussion. I do think that one thing that we never really talk about when we talk about the idea of abortion, I can't believe I'm talking about this on my channel, but we don't actually tell women about the physical and mental ramifications of going through an abortion procedure. In the same way that we don't actually tell women about the side effects of being on hormonal birth control. We just tell women it's in their best interest, it's good for them, they won't get pregnant, and this and that. We also do not fully tell women and express to them what the physical and mental ramifications are of abortion. It is not just a snap your fingers and you're not pregnant anymore type of situation. Not getting into a debate with anybody about whether or not they should be legal or whether or not people should be able to have them or anything like that. I'm not getting into that discussion. I have my own beliefs about that, and people are entitled to their beliefs about that, and I'm not getting into that discussion. However, I will say that the fact that we jump to that as being the answer for this situation, if a woman is pregnant and maybe the man doesn't want to stick around or she's alone or something like that, and we just act as if it's like, oh, well, she'll just go to this place, they'll take care of it, she'll walk away and she'll be fine, and we don't actually address all of the other, both physical things. I mean, it's a surgical procedure. I mean, it's not just like wave a magic wand, right? It's actually a surgical procedure, and it's also something that takes a huge toll on a woman's body, on her hormones, on her mental health. There's a pretty high correlation with suicide rates and women who have had abortion procedures. When I see stuff like this, especially in just a mainstream movie where you have a man who is acting as if getting an abortion is just a here-all, end-all, easy answer, and he's basically just going to take care of it and it'll be done, and it's his way of skirting his responsibility. He showed up, he had sex. Yes, she showed up and she had sex too, but now they've created a baby together and he wants to just completely absolve himself of the responsibility because it inconveniences his life, particularly because he has a family. But, you know, even if he didn't, you know, it just inconveniences his life and does not actually respect the fact that this woman put her body at risk. She is now carrying his DNA, essentially, and we act in our society as if it's only women that want these abortions and we're fighting for women to have the rights for them, but we're also not fighting for the rights of women to decide to have a child that a man showed up to create, and he should be held responsible for that. And the more that we get into this discussion of like, okay, well, let's just act as if women have that choice so that they can get out of it, the more men are going to show up and say, well, she had a choice. It's like, well, he had a choice too. He could have not slept with someone who wasn't his wife, right? And I don't even know if I'm going to keep this part in the video because I know that's controversial, but just stuff that I had to say. This is not a political statement. This is not a judgment against anybody who's made a certain choice in her life at all. I just feel like we have a lot of really twisted ideas about what abortion is, what abortion isn't. There's a lot of misinformation out there about what it is and what it isn't. And we also do not present to women what the ramifications and side effects are of this. And also, it's another opportunity for men to not be held accountable for their decisions. I know that everybody acts as if, oh, well, men have no control over their sexual urges. Yeah, they do. And if men do not have control over their sexual urges, they should not be allowed to lead a relationship. They should not be allowed to lead anything or make any decision, because if you don't have sexual discipline, then you don't have discipline at all. So yeah, that scene, I felt like, especially for a major movie, and that's a really big theme in a lot of the 80s movies I've broken down, is the theme of abortion. It was so common even in the 80s. Like, we're discussing it now because it's in the news, but this was something that was being made mainstream. It was mainstream in Dirty Dancing. It's, you know, it's being referenced in this movie as if it's like no big deal. And the more that we get convinced that it is no big deal, it is a big deal. Whether you think it's right or wrong, that's a whole other discussion, but it is not no big deal. It is not just something that you just snap your fingers and everything goes back to the way it was before. No, it is a life-changing experience, and that is something that we should take into consideration, and that we should also impart on women, that it is a big decision to make. Whether or not you think a woman should have a right to make that decision is a different situation, but we should also be telling women about all of the ramifications of any choice that she makes, and actually presenting that to her so she has all the information in front of her. All I'm gonna say about that. Dan really does spend this whole movie being pretty unlikable, and to be honest, it all is about him. Like, it really is about him and him trying not to get caught because he doesn't want to mess up things with his wife, because it's really all about him. It's not so much like that her feelings will be hurt, it's that she'll be mad at him. It's he doesn't want this pretty major thing that he did to destroy his life, and he's really worried about himself. I have very little sympathy for Dan in this movie. Like, he does not come across as somebody who I would root for at all. I do really feel for his wife, because she really doesn't deserve this. You know, I mean, yes, their intimacy had faded, but it wasn't completely far off, and it would not have been very difficult for them to get it back on track if they both had made the effort. However, if he was the one that felt like he needed to step out, if he had made the effort with her, they probably wouldn't be in this situation. The individual scene breakdowns in this movie are not really all that relevant. However, I will say there is a scene that I do really like when, I mean, it's heartbreaking, but I do think it is very poignant, is when Dan is telling his wife about Alex and the fact that he's had an affair and that she is pregnant. And the way that Dan's wife reacts, honestly, so beautiful. And granted, it's painful to watch, but how many women, I mean, maybe not when their husband says, hey, I've been having an affair and she's pregnant, maybe not, but how many women when their husband tells them something or does something that upsets them or that they don't like or that hurts them, they just try to act very aloof or calm or like, oh, it doesn't bother me. Oh, okay, whatever. Or I'm fine. I'm fine. Like, just so you know, guys, when a woman says I'm fine, she's never fine. We're never fine. But how many wives and women feel like the way to appear feminine or the way to be a high value woman or the way to be a queen, so to speak, is to seem unbothered, to seem oh, you know what, I don't care about you enough to care what you did. I'm gonna just, you know, toss my Prada bag over my shoulder and just walk away. If that's your legitimate reaction to, I don't care about this man, I don't care what he did to me, I'm gonna walk away and have my dignity, so to speak, then do it, fine. However, if you are a feminine cord woman and you're connected to your feminine energy and your husband, who you love and have created a family with, tells you anything, I mean, it doesn't even have to be this extreme, but anything that hurts you, show him it hurts you. And honestly, she does such a beautiful job in this scene of showing him how it hurts her. She goes into tears and sorrow and rage and anger, and she is letting that go. That is feminine energy. Feminine energy is, oh, you did this to me, I just don't care. Okay, whatever, I don't care. No, that's not feminine energy. Feminine energy is, you hurt me, I'm gonna show you how much you hurt me. It's putting that shield down, because that cool, aloof attitude, that I'm fine, I don't care what you did to me, like that's a shield. That's a wall up. You're guarded. Feminine energy, not guarded. We're not guarded. We have no shield up. Our heart is open, and we are like, you hurt me, I'm gonna let all of that out. That's a feminine storm right there. He deserves all that storm. He deserves her anger and her rage. He deserves all of that. And it's not about him. It's not about that. Whether they repair their relationship, whether they don't repair their relationship, it does not matter. That is feminine energy. It's letting that go. It's letting that flow out of you. It's you know, if a man is out of alignment, which you could very easily argue this man is out of alignment, he is not in integrity. He has completely betrayed her trust and everything. Let that out. It's not even for him, but in the future, if you do get into another relationship with somebody, part of being the feminine being in the relationship is actually letting that energy, those emotions, those feelings, letting them flow and responding in the moment. Like her response, that the tears, the anger, the frustration, that was not her past. Like that was not like, oh, daddy didn't love me, so I'm gonna take this out on him because he did something annoying or something like that. No, this was the man that she was devoted to, that she had a child with, her husband, had betrayed her. He was completely out of integrity, and she was expressing that. That is vulnerability that is beautiful, and that is letting that go and releasing it. And she was going to recover from that situation, whatever she had decided to do. If they decided to stay together, I mean, things got really kind of complicated with the two of them. It wasn't really established whether they were actually going to make a go at it again or what the deal was going to be. But she was going to recover from that so much sooner because she let that out. It was for her. It didn't have to be for him. Expressing your feminine emotions is going to have an effect on your masculine partner for sure. And if you do want to keep the relationship going, it's important to do that. However, it's not just about him. It's not for him. It's for you. It's letting that flow through you. That's your feminine energy. And I would make the argument that you should not be letting any man, no matter what he does to you, destroy your feminine energy, because that's yours. It is your feminine energy. It is within you. It is a beautiful part of you. And you should never be giving a man enough, you know, power over you to destroy that feminine energy. You have a right to that feminine energy. It is who you are. It is part of your being. And that feminine flow, like releasing that emotions, however those emotions come out, that's your right. That is your beautiful feminine energy coming through, and that is you, and that is beautiful. And too many women just shut that down and just pretend they don't care, as they feel like, oh, I'm getting even with him by not showing him the satisfaction that he's hurt me, or I don't want him to think that he's hurt me because I don't want him to think he has that much power over me. Actually, it's more powerful to express that you are operating not in the highest support of love, and I'm gonna show you how that makes me feel. Like, that is the power of the feminine energy. That's truly her dark feminine coming out. That's her Kali wanting to destroy the ego. Like that's the dark feminine energy. Now Alex has a lot of darkness to her, but that's all coming from wounding. You can tell. I mean, it's wounding, it's neediness, it's controlling. And while I think expressing that in a creative form, like having that anger, that rage, that neediness, going through those feelings, going through whatever trauma that she's, you know, had in her life that led for her to be that needy, to be in that, because, you know, that one situation, that one weekend was probably not what triggered this whole thing. It was probably something from her past. That's past trauma, past wounding. All valid. I'm not encouraging her behavior or anything, but I am saying that expressing that anger, that wounding, that stuff through some kind of creative expression or movement or punching a pillow or like letting that stuff out, incredibly important. However, your dark feminine is more what Dan's wife did when she found out that he was cheating, was basically letting that anger, that expression out like that. Now, she had to shut it down when their child walked in, which doing that in front of children I know can be kind of a gray area. Having a daughter see the mother actually fully in her feminine expression, positive and negative, you could easily argue is going to have a positive effect on her, because she's going to grow up knowing that she can express herself when she is with a man who is out of alignment in the future. So, you know, I think as a parent, I'm not a parent, and I'm not here to tell anybody like how they should make that decision when it comes to parenting. However, I do think, you know, she shut that down to try to not show her daughter how she was feeling, and I think that could potentially be damaging. Although I do understand that, you know, as a parent, you may not want to show your child, you know, the fullness of everything that's going on in your relationship. So that's a gray area, it's a judgment call. But I do think the way she initially was expressing how she felt and her anger, her sorrow, her frustration, all that kind of stuff when Dan first told her that he was having the affair, I think that was a really, really great example of dark feminine energy, but definitely letting your feminine energy flow. So yeah, not a lot of individual scenes in this movie that really are representational. It's really the overarching theme, and I really want to take this opportunity to talk a little bit more about fidelity. Yeah, and I mean, I knew it was gonna happen because I know it's a pop culture iconic movie, but poor bunny. You know me and my social media, I love bunnies. When I see bunnies when I go out for a walk or something, like every time I see a bunny, like I jump up and down like a 5-year-old girl. Like I can't help it. Like I just get so excited about bunnies. Poor bunny. I couldn't watch it. I literally covered my eyes. I knew it was coming and I just like covered my eyes. So I just couldn't watch it. I can't. Such a girl. Anyway, so yeah, this was a little bit different type of film breakdown because it wasn't really necessarily about individual scenes and energies. It was kind of more of an overarching theme from the whole movie, but you know, I really hope it was helpful. I know some of these topics are really kind of controversial and a little, you know, sensitive for many people. So yeah, I hope that you got something out of this video. I'm always open to, you know, respectful discussions if you had different views or same views or something like that. You know, disrespectful comments, or if we start taking things into a really complicated situation, because I know these are very sensitive issues, I will delete comments because I don't want this to become a really negative space or anything like that. I want to keep the space positive. So just sharing my thoughts. If you have different thoughts, we can have an open discussion about it. Completely, just I ask that you keep things respectful. But if you do have any thoughts, any other film suggestions, anything like that, let me know. Leave a comment in the comment section below. I love to hear from you and I love your suggestions. If you enjoyed this video and found it helpful, please give it a big thumbs up and be sure you subscribe to my channel. If you want to learn more about feminine energy and also the art of feminine communication, I have online courses. The details are in the description box below, along with links to all my social media accounts. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you join me next time.